is because I think that CWAC have done an absolutely wonderful job on two particular areas. And yes, of course, they've done other things as well, but these two particular areas are so important now. One is the climate emergency, and the other one is the poverty emergency. And I'm glad to see that we got Mandy on there as well. And so what I'd like you to do, if you could actually start off, Matt, and give us a 15-minute précis of what is going on with your particular situation with the climate emergency, what's going on in CWAC, and is it going any further than that? I'd be grateful for that. And then I'll ask Mandy to do 15 minutes, and then I'm sure that a lot of us would like to ask you some questions. Is that okay, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. So for anybody that's not familiar with what's gone on, a few years ago, we declared a climate emergency, and we insisted that the council took a position to work out how they were going to make themselves carbon neutral by a minimum of 2035. As a result, officers thought that they could make the council neutral by 2030, but we had a borough-wide response to be able to deal with that and influence other people that were making the emissions, because as a council we're only actually accountable for 0.6% of the emissions. So we set ourselves quite an ambitious target, and we have sugared it up with quite a few of the big emitters, and I'll send you through the documents that I'll talk you through. Probably most of you have heard these already, but we were quite quick off the mark. We got a study done by Anthesis, and they baselined all of our trajectories as a borough and also as a council, and we're quite confident that we can meet those as a council, and we're ambitious in the fact that we're trying to form relationships to encourage some of our biggest emitters in Cheshire to do the same, and it hasn't been a closed door, which is really positive in light of everything that's going on. I think even big industry and grey energy sources are accepting now that people need to be doing the right thing, to a point where I read a report yesterday in INEOS talking about scaling up, and they're not even considering blue hydrogen, they're considering green hydrogen from the off, which there's two differences, well there's three differences with hydrogen. You can create hydrogen to put into the grid through just burning fossil fuels to make it, which is dirty, and predictably iGas, Cllr and the fracking companies want to do that. And you've got the second one, which is blue hydrogen, which is a fairly honourable form of transition that comes of creating hydrogen, but not pumping the excess gases into the air. And then you've got green, but they capture it through CCG, CCS, carbon capture storage. Then you've got the third one, which is green hydrogen, which is basically your power, your energy needs are created through a renewable energy source, and then it becomes then you can create the hydrogen, put it into the grid, and then it's a winner. The beauty of hydrogen at the moment is we don't have to get people off their asses to do it straight off, because we could put a 20% mix of hydrogen into people's gas supply, and they wouldn't even realise. I'm Dave, forgive me, but I'm not a I don't work for a hydrogen company. but anyway, that's our, when people say why aren't we pursuing electric buses like Warrington and stuff is because we've got real assets in Cheshire. We've got massive salt caverns. We've got offshore gas fields that we've got potential for CCS, and it's a real opportunity. So, as some of you may have seen, last week we formalised the plan, Le Plan, which will hopefully guide Cheshire West and Chester to carbon neutrality. It's 88 pages and it's quite heavy. But any of you that have signed up to the newsletter, you'll have probably read it already. I mean, it was really a compelling viewing and reading. It's a real. If you like energy and decarbonisation in Cheshire, it'll have been like a dream to you. So, should I run through the executive summary, Chair?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. So, in 2019, we declared the climate emergency, and I wasn't particularly bothered who declared it, as long as it was declared, and then we could get to work in the background to get what was going on. And there's been a really, really good response from all of our industrial partners. Our chief executive has taken it really seriously, which has had an impact within all of the officers to a point now where I've just been in a meeting where there's recommendations coming from the scrutiny committee and also officers themselves saying that climate change and the emergency and building standards should be part of our everyday thinking, which is absolutely bloody amazing. It's a very, very heavy report, and this works through various aspects of energy change. It works through the principles of how we got about it, and the fact that this report is an evidence-based process. And I would really, really appreciate it if people on this group, and also virtually looking at you and Cllr, but if you could get our Green New Deal members to engage with this, because I might be a bit of a sado, but it is really, really good reading.
Yeah, I'll post on the group and send a link to it.
Brilliant. Yeah, the consultation will be live at the end of this week, so it's quite a good time for this meeting. So this report combines the extensive consultation and feasibility and research through an organisation called Anthesis, and they're the top dogs in the UK. And that's intertwined with this report, and it goes through from what we can do if we don't really care about it, and we try and just like rearrange the furniture, which I'm not in the business of doing. And then you've got kind of the halfway house, which would probably what the Liberals would be doing. And then you've got scatter 4, which is what we have to be doing to meet our Paris climate change obligations. And so throughout this report, you're going to see quite a few graphs of a scatter 4 technique, which have to be implemented. We don't have a choice. If we're serious about climate change, that's what we need to be doing.
Yes, Matt, can I ask you a question on this very quickly? If you can send me the link, all right, send it to me. I will make sure that everyone on this call will get a download of it, and I'll send it out to everyone else, if that would help.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No, I was just explaining, just giving people a heads up.
Yeah, I know, that, but I'm saying because you're giving everyone a heads up, people will want to read it. Give it to me. I'll make sure that they get the report to read.
Okay. Yep. Do you want me to carry on?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Okay. So we've had feedback from the Climate Emergency Task Force, which was made up of members, which was unusually really apolitical, which was lovely for such a thing. And we also got on the expertise of an advisory panel, which were big industry members who have also been really keen to join and put in their expertise as well. So it's been quite a broadly community-led policy. I'll try and send you this now, Dave. Actually, but I'm on my different.
Please do.
I'm on my different laptop, so I can't. But it's. I think people will be pleasantly surprised with what's been prepared.
That's brilliant, Matt. What we can do now is give people an opportunity to think of some questions to ask you. And if we could go to Mandy. Are you there, Mandy?
Hiya.
Now, Mandy, we was on about 6 or 7 weeks ago because she was presenting, I presume it's a motion to CWAC about poverty emergency, following on, which is the other big thing which I'm interested in as well as the environment. There's also poverty throughout the country. Mandy explained everything which she wanted to actually do at the meeting. It actually got through, which she was very, very pleased about. And what we need to know now, Mandy, if you wouldn't mind, is where you're up to and what can we do? Where are you going with it?
Okay, thank you. I've got the. I'll refer, if you don't mind, if I'm not looking at you, I'll look at my screen here because I've got some notes from the meeting that I had with Councillor Gittins the other day. I was just giving her an update on it, so it makes sense for me to use that because I'm otherwise brain dead after the day that.
We do appreciate you turning up. Thank you very much.
No worries. Right, so yeah, so we got it through. It was awesome because it was seconded by Councillor Paul Bowers, which Matt helped with me getting that sorted. And he probably, I mean, we had some speakers there from the public, a real sort of mix of speakers in support, ranging from people with lived experience who've been involved in the Poverty Truth Commission as community inspirers. We had a couple, and then there was a couple that couldn't get into the meeting, so I'm going to use their speeches on our Poverty Emergency website, the written ones. And we had someone from the University of Chester who's got expertise around food poverty. She gave a speech. And also we had the Lieutenant, I'm not sure how you say it, the Queen's representative, David Briggs, give a speech as well in support. So we got us off to a great start. And then we were on agenda item 7, so there was a bit of a weird gap in between those speeches and then us going through. And out of all of the speeches, I thought that Councillor Bowers, who's a Green Party councillor, was the most impressive. It was an amazing speech, and it just demonstrated that he really got it. And I thought that really bodes well in terms of how we can put those two sort of agendas together, because they do, naturally sit side by side and there's lots of crossover. And the debate sort of ranged around some quite interesting territory. So one of the points that was raised by the opposition was, is this Poverty Truth Advisory Board, that an advisory board sounds like a talking shop rather than anything useful. So I'll just give you a bit of a rundown, and then hopefully that'll demonstrate how far from a talking shop we are. Because I was stung, wounded. So I'm sure they were too. Okay, so we got it through, and we got a decent level of cross-party support. And I mean, in some senses, what it does is, having a poverty emergency, it gives us something to hang a lot of other things on and to join with other councils on. So it gives us just some common ground that we can meet on. And it's also, it raises a bit of a flurry of interest. So myself and also the other, I co-chair that Poverty Truth Advisory Board with one of our community inspirers from Neston, Anthony, and him and myself one of the offices that supports us, and then another Community Inspire have been invited to an event to talk, which we did the other day, and I've been invited to a few events as well. So what that does is it just opens up conversations with groups of people about poverty and about the impact of COVID on low-income communities that we wouldn't otherwise be having. So it provides those kind of opportunities as well, which is really cool. We have the formal backing of the Equalities Trust. That's something that's happened quite recently, which is brilliant because they're doing some fantastic work around the socioeconomic duty, the part of the Equalities Act that wasn't really brought into force from 2010 onwards, which pertains to making sure there's checks and balances in place in terms of, like, for example, local authority policies and the impact that they have on people on low incomes. So it recognises low income as an equalities issue, and that's a big factor within making the declaration of a poverty emergency. It's not just about saying, let's have a look at what this lived experience is like for people, let's have a look at what the different impacts of it are, but it's also saying, let's reframe the narrative and the conversation on poverty so that we talk about poverty as an equalities issue. Because if we've got, over twice as many people from the lowest 10% of the income spectrum dying as a result of COVID than there are in the highest 10%, then that is most definitely, an equalities issue. If they're dying in those numbers just because they're poor, then that clearly needs to be addressed in that way. But it's not just, that's at the most extreme end of the data that we've got in terms of the disproportionate impacts. There's lots of different ways that COVID has disproportionately impacted unfairly on people that are on low incomes. So the poverty emergency also sets out how we're going to work with a broader range of partners and stakeholders, including the unions and including the universities, and I can give you some updates on where we're up to with that as well. Right, big piece of news, something that we've been working on is the poverty emergency website. So this is going to be our online platform where we're going to put our documents, so the motion, which other councils can use as a model motion, and other bits and pieces around the membership of the Poverty Truth Advisory Board, the terms of reference, and just things that, press release, things that can be lifted off the shelf by other councils that are interested in declaring. But it'll also provide a home for a newsletter so that, like, as Cllr Bryan, as Matt's done with the climate emergency web space, this will be a poverty emergency kind of newsletter which gives updates as to what we're doing, but also provides a platform for us to interact with people and improve on how we're consulting with people that are on low income, so that the volume of that missing voice within the local democracy is kind of raised as well, so that can be turned up. What else are we going to have? We're going to have our meeting notes on there. We're going to have links to any of the strategies that are underway that we're working, because we've been working, there's a new council, it's not a new council plan, there is the council plan which was approved last February, but then because of the impacts of COVID on service provision and on people's needs and things like that, we've had to write an additional plan on, to go alongside that, to take account of those changes. And, we're not through it yet, we're still right in the middle of it as well. So that's probably going to be a live document in a sense that's going to need to be revisited more often than we would normally. But the Poverty Truth Advisory Board and myself have been involved in drafting that. And we've really, I haven't seen the final copy yet, but we've been involved, we've had a big involvement in that, and we've managed to secure a specific strand for poverty within that. So it's a pillar in its own right, as climate emergency is a pillar in its own right, as all of the, it sits alongside all of the other ones as well. So even though it's a cross-cutting theme, it has its own space as well, which is really, really cool, because that means that when we develop, which is one of our next tasks, a specific anti-poverty strategy and action plan, it will kind of sit within that plan and form a central part of it. So on there we will have linked strategies, things that are in the pipeline, ways that people can get involved either as a volunteer or just in sharing their experience. We'll update data, local data, national data, about, it's like the state of the borough type report, but with a focus on poverty and the impacts of the crisis on poverty as well. we'll have a link to the Poverty Truth Advisory Board so that community inspirers can have a voice on there as well and report on what it is that they're doing. I'll probably have a blog space on there as the Leaders Champion so that I can put my own sort of narrative on alongside all of this. We'll have a section on there about sort of inclusive economy as in how it relates, what we're doing in low income communities around community wealth building and community ownership support. Let's have a look. So yeah, so I'm excited about that. We've got the outline of it together. We're drafting it at the moment, but we're doing it, it's co-produced, so we're working closely with the community inspirers as well to make sure that they're happy with it and that it's got, you know, everything in it that they want in it as well. I've been doing a fair bit of work around housing. That's something I haven't really caught up with Matt properly yet. This is like, there's so many aspects to this. But I have been looking into housing and different approaches to housing. There's an amazing project called Cllr in Leeds, which I think was the first co-living sort of eco housing development in the UK. And it took them, I think it was like 6 or 8 years to get from the idea to the build's done and they're in and it all works. But so because they've been through that process, they're a model of good practice that other people can look to as well. So that's something that I need to have a chat with Matt about and just see where we're up to with that, because one of the things that I'm aware of through my casework in the ward and wider is just this issue of people in family situations with kids who are having to uproot their kids because there isn't enough housing stock for them to be able to remain in the same area. So say it's a private tenancy and the landlord wants to sell the property, or for other reasons, overcrowding, or whatever it is. There's a real problem there, and there aren't any clear answers, and it's a problem that's only going to get worse because we're heading towards a likely uptick in homelessness and family homelessness, because family homelessness tends to be specifically more related to dramatic drops in income rather than things like substance misuse and other problems like that. We know that cliff edge we've slowed our rate of travel towards it, but it's still there and we're still on the same course, we're still on the same road. So we need to look at that. I've had some conversations with Councillor Gittins around that as well. I'm involved
Mandy, sorry to cut you off, but I've got 6% battery left.
Oh no.
And
okay.
Who's you can carry on, but won't be much time.
Matt, sorry, I'm going to cut across. If you got more to say, Matt, and you've only got 6% left, I'm sure Mandy wouldn't mind. So carry on, Matt.
Give way.
No, I've got. It was just to give people time for questions before my battery runs out.
Right. Well, I'm sure there are a few questions and what have you. And if anybody wants to ask a quick question to Matt before he runs out, please put your hand up. And if I can see you, I'll ask you to ask your question. And I'm looking now for anyone with their hand up, if anyone can help me. Yes, Anne.
Matt, were you talking about a new report, or is it the antithesis report that came out a while ago?
Well, we've got the new, we've got the actual culmination report, which is being released this week,
right.
which is based on a lot of what antithesis had to say, and you'll be the first to get it before anyone else does.
So that will be in the November newsletter, then, will it?
Yeah, it will be, but I'll send it to you individually.
Yeah, cheers.
After
the
meeting. Yeah.
Brilliant. Anybody else? The interesting thing, Matt, is that there's what you were actually talking about with the buses in Warrington. They're going electric. I didn't quite understand the reason why you're saying you're not going electric buses in Chester or CWAC.
Because I think we've got a unique opportunity in Cheshire West. We've got hugely heavy industry to a point where we're 4 times as polluting as any other. Well, we're the 4th highest polluting borough in the country, and like per capita per person, we're 2.5 times more polluting than anywhere else in the UK.
Oh dear.
It's horrific, and electric buses won't cut the mustard. What we need is a decent hydrogen infrastructure that can not crunch the economy, but at the same time deliver green growth, because we do have a lot of skilled expertise. And off the back of that, we can power our buses. That's my goal. I don't know if people have objections to that, that's fine.
Yeah, but that's fine, Matt. That sounds absolutely brilliant. And if you can send me all the details, what I will do, and I will do it for Mandy as well, is that you can use me to actually send out details to. I've got over 100 people who I contact every week, who are all activists and people who are interested in what's going on. And if we can get through them many other ways, I will always distribute stuff if you send it to me. But the other question I was talking about is that when I was chair of the East Branch, I invited a great guy, and I can't remember his name now, who came down and started talking to me about super trees. And the thing is that I wander down to the roundabout in the car and what have you, and I just see these rust things at the moment. Can you tell me what's going on with them?
Yeah, well, if you've been there in less than like in the past 6 months, they've got green climbers going all over them. They're lovely, and they are a bit rusty still, but the climbing plants are climbing. And to be honest, they've climbed faster than I thought they would. They've almost reached the second bow of the welding. So eventually, like, nature doesn't happen overnight.
But I thought we were going to have solar lights on it.
Yeah, it's happening. Yeah,
it's just taking longer. Yeah.
Well, no. The growing takes longer. We can't take plants to take longer, but there have been problems with the flooding and putting in solar lights and stuff. But
right,
it will be done. Yeah.
It will be good. Great, cool. Has anybody else got any questions? Quickly.
I'd just like to say thanks for coming, even though you've absolutely shuttered after your meetings, Matt.
Yeah. Vicky.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks for coming, Matt. I just wondered, in reducing the amount of emissions and everything, is there some kind of trading in carbon going on, or is it a complete reduction?
It's a combination of both. That's a really good question, Vicky. So in this report, we identify areas of offsetting, which would be trading, doing things as they were, and then buying a bit of carbon credits elsewhere. And their recommendations to just stop doing what you're doing. But what we don't want to do is crunch the economy and bring people on board. And I think big oil and gas have got this into their heads now, and they're looking for ways to like retain jobs and not continue as they are. but we've got real opportunities in Cheshire West to not hemorrhage like massive amount of jobs, and then we can still retain green growth.
That's cool. Follow-up
I'd
question,
like to think
Vicky?
that's what Labour Party's about.
Yeah.
Follow-up question.
Thank you for letting me in again. I've just been reading around this, and you know, most people who are serious about climate change do not go along with this trade-off, because it means somewhere like CWAC that's got you know, a heavy user can look like on paper that they've reduced it, but actually all they've done is traded it. And when we think about
it's called set aside, set off.
when you think of the plan as a whole, we want to reduce it as a whole, not trade off. We want to just get, you know, because we've only got 10 years.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Once you read the report, the trade-off of what you're talking about is at the bottom of the list of what we want to be doing. Well, if you've got you're talking about a pyramid of need. You've got a pyramid basically of use. Well, you've got use at the top. Then you've got industrial use, and then it tears down, and then at the bottom you've got trade-off, as you call it, and that isn't acceptable to myself or anyone else, because eventually everybody will end trading off.
Yeah. Anybody else? Well, what I'm going to do, Matt, I'm going to say thank you very much for everything that you've said and done, and whatever. If you can send me the information, I'll get it out to people. I've already had a couple of people who have actually left the meeting and said thank you very, very much indeed, and it is greatly appreciated. Not only what you're doing, which I think is a wonderful, well worth thing to do, but also thank you very much for turning up tonight. So thanks, Matt.
That's my pleasure. Thank you. Cheers. Thank you, Dave.
You're welcome. You're welcome anytime. Anytime.
And please send me an email if you've got any innovative green ideas. So,
well, I'm sure
yeah,
I'll have a word with Anne about that.
Thank you.
Cheers, Matt.
Bye.
Thank you very much
Bye.
indeed. Bye-bye. I'm going to move back to Mandy now. And if you don't mind, Mandy, it's that I've seen a couple of things over the last week or so saying zero COVID. And it has your name underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
I will. Yeah, yeah. Do you want me to? Yeah. I was going to come to that.
I would like to, whatever you want.
Okay, I'll bob it in now. Then there's a couple of, well, so one of the aims within the poverty emergency is to create sort of local recovery hubs in the communities that have been most harshly affected. So that would be in low-income communities. And the idea of that is to try and situate support locally. I mean, obviously we're locked down at the moment, so it's not possible. But the idea is to provide like a local place, which would be something like employment, you know, I can't remember, like community places that we used to have in the 80s where people could get together, and it felt like a community space rather than a council space, rather than a corporate space. And it can be an empowering space for people, it can be a social space, it can be a space for learning, and it can be a space for activism as well. So one of the things that I've been involved in is the tenants union, and another that I could do with some help on if people are interested in getting involved and helping me with getting that set up in Cheshire. And another thing is the Zero COVID campaign, because the way that, why I got involved in that was Ian Allinson, who I think he's the chair of the regional TUC, I get, or Manchester Trades Council, I think he's the chair of, explained, you know, the bullet points of what it involves, and it's supportive of the approach that SAGE, the independent SAGE group, have been calling for a long while, which is what we should have done at the beginning and we didn't. You know, which and it's doable because other countries have done it as well, but it's about sort of improving our approach, locking down properly, you know, so that we can actually get control of the virus, and then making sure, and that would include schools. I'm not sure on what the actual detail of the schools demands bit of it are yet, because I think they're following the NEU lead on that, and I'm not sure whether the NEU have I think they're more emphasising secondary schools where there's more contagion than primary schools, but I'm not sure. But it's overall a harsher, tougher lockdown so that we can get out of this and get control of it a lot quicker and get the economy moving again a lot quicker and allow people to see their families, and for people who are medically vulnerable to move around and you know, participate in life like they are doing in Vietnam, China, South Korea, New Zealand, increasingly in Australia. You know, it's doable. So that's what that campaign is about. So I'm setting up, I want to set up a Cheshire they've got groups set up on WhatsApp for each of the different areas so that they can organise campaigns, because this is something that's going to build and grow rather than it's all got to be done before the 2nd of December or whenever. But I haven't got any volunteers yet to join me in the group in organising that campaign, so I haven't created one yet, but I'm just conscious that they've got one in Manchester, you know, there's one in, but they've got them all over, but we're missing, Cheshire's missing, so if anybody wants to help me with that. But the tenants union idea again is that there's a lot of people who are very vulnerable. A lot of the support that's offered is to people who are in private rentals, situations where the landlords have a lot of power. And when tenants act collectively and with support, they can actually shift the balance of power. And you know that there's been some quite good examples of how that's already been successful in other areas. We've got the backup and the support of Manchester Tenants Union, and really anything that's grassrootsy and that supports people, the people who've been hardest hit, and that helps them to become more active and more conscious really of the different power imbalances within society and at play with COVID, I think it's all to the good. So if anybody wants to help me with getting that organised and off the ground, please let me know, because that's at the early stages as well. I'm working with BRIO and the Poverty Truth Advisory Board are too, because there's some potential for us to develop some of these hubs within some of those settings. The BRIO service is being sort of re-evaluated at the moment to a hub and spoke model, and there's been consultation on that with the public. But BRIO are sort of keen to work with us in the Poverty Truth Advisory Board and with myself to make sure that we are linked in, you know, and that we can try and sort of create these kind of hubs and make good use of those spaces for people that are on low income, where there might be lower uptake in terms of leisure, but also in terms of like social prescribing and things like that. I'm working with the University of Cllr on a mega study, which I'll come back in a few weeks and tell you more about if you want. It's just dead exciting. They've got some funding. I just spied that they had about £4 worth of funding, and I had a little idea for it, so I got in touch, and that has kind of just grown into this huge project, which I'm really excited about. And it should enable us to give a really good, robust evaluation of what we're doing, and what the difference that the poverty emergency sort of initiative is making, how effective we're being in terms of lived experience involvement, and help us to gather the data that we need to gather to evidence that poverty is an equalities issue, rather than, and it's a systemic issue, rather than it being, you know, an individual failing or lack. There's a whole systemic approach there. Transport Review, we've been working with them as well, just to try and make sure that we overlay what our current public transport routes are on top of, so it's not just the routes, it's like the frequency and accessibility of workplace, decent, you know, where you can get decent work, but also access, you know, the connections that you need for benefits, advice and amenities and culture and everything, you know, all of those things. Because at the moment, we've got some communities that are cut off, and it's not even just people that are on low incomes in rural areas. There's some of our, you know, more urban communities as well, haven't got direct routes to places where they can access work as well. Trying to shift the conversation on within the recovery and renewal document that I talked about, rather than talking about making sure that people are in work, to talking about, well, that work can't be poverty work because there's no point otherwise. So it's like, you know, that we're trying to change the conversation really about this. I've told you about that. Oh, advocacy. I've been working with the CAB. There's already something called the Community Connectors. We've got some CAB employees, which are community connectors. They're there for people who hit, you know, like a financial crisis, to help and assist them to navigate through all the different sources of help that they need. But obviously we're looking at, again, a cliff edge with that, same as we're doing with potential homelessness and job loss. It's going to combine into, you know, mental health needs and need for support with food and a whole range of things. And the idea is that if someone in need turns up at the food bank, they may or may not get advice, help and support as to how to get the other areas of help that they need. So the community connectors have all of that knowledge and information at their fingertips, but there may be insufficient capacity if we hit that point. So we're trying to think ahead of how we can extend that capacity. So one of the things that has been put in place has been this volunteer connectors program, where any of us that want to go through, they've got like this online training where you can build up your awareness of resources and become a volunteer connector just through doing that. But I'm trying to develop something that's in between that, where you just go online for a couple of hours, and the employed, I think they already have the beginnings of something in place, but I've spoken with them and said, do you have the capacity to expand that if we can find the volunteers that will be willing to do it? Because basically we need to make it visible to people so that if they're in a state of panic, and trauma in terms of their finances, it's obvious to them where they can go within the community to get that help, and for someone to walk with them, alongside them on that journey, because you know, they're much less likely to have long-term I mean, sometimes the help's there and people just don't know where to go for it. Sometimes the help is not there because we haven't got the housing stock or whatever it is, you know. But if they at least are not left on their own to navigate that, then there's less likely to be longer term, really serious mental health impacts, for one thing. So it's just trying to think of ways that we can make sure people aren't left on their own, you know, when we do get to that crisis point, which the government keeps pushing further down the road, but which we know is coming. So we're looking at developing some training and scaffolding around that, because obviously it's going to be for people who are in quite a vulnerable situation. So we're going to need to do some selection process around that, and some training beyond just going online, you know, to build up your knowledge. So there's that bit of, I'm looking into what we can put in place with regards advocacy, formal advocacy for people through legal processes, in terms of housing support, but I can't tell you any more about that at the moment because I haven't got very far with it, but it's there on my radar. We've got a data collection subgroup, which we'll be meeting next week, where we're pulling together lots of different partners to see what our baseline is and start, you know, mapping out what data we haven't got and what data we need. That's something that I wanted to do it for weeks and weeks, but because we needed to get this motion worded right to get it through, and to get a decent level of support from it, that's been the main focus. I think we're working on, so we're working on our own poverty strategy and action plan. So that'll be out within the next few months. I think it has to be out by March. And then the budget's out for consultation, and we are also being consulted on that as part of that process as the Poverty Truth Advisory Board. So there's just tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff going on. Knackering. But that's where we're up to.
What I'd like you to do with that, as you did last time, Mandy, you sent me a couple of links, which I actually sent out to people, make them aware of it. You are looking for people to come and volunteer and to help. The only way you can actually get help is if you actually explain what is actually going on. And if I can help by doing that with the contact I've got, send me the details. I'll send it out to everyone. And even if we just get one person, it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile. And I'll say to you what I said to Matt, is that any time that you want to come on for the Many Mondays, if you've got something which you want to say, you're more than welcome, because this is what it's all here for. Certainly within Chester, certainly within CWAC, this is where we live. This is what's very important. I think there might be a couple of questions for you. One of the questions was, when you actually did this particular thing at CWAC, what was the attitude of the people there who are the Tories who have developed this programme of austerity for the last 10 years? Did you find much objection from them?
Do you know what? I think there's general nervousness, and that would be the same across any council, because the council themselves they're apolitical, aren't they? So, you know, the councillors obviously aren't, but the council itself. So they're always nervous, I think, about any potential crossover between politics and what the council does, but and how the council spends its money as well, you know. But which is understandable. But I think the way around that has been to talk about it not in terms of party politics and not to go all out attack, which you could do. That's an option, you know. But I just don't think you'd get as far in approaching it that way. And it's really just been a case of trying to look at it as a what's the evidence? What's the evidence? And if we've got good solid evidence that there's an equalities issue here, let's go with that, you know, because that's much more difficult to argue with in any case, and it doesn't drop anyone in hot water politically, you know. But we did get some Tories that voted in favour, which I really wasn't expecting. We got a lot of cross-party support actually. And then there were an awful lot that abstained, and then there were a few that voted against. And I think it landed as well at a time that the full council meeting landed at the same time as it was in the headlines about Marcus Rashford's campaign and heading into the half-term holiday, you know, with the free school meal kids going hungry. So it was high on the agenda, and I think it probably meant that we naturally managed to pick up more support than maybe we would otherwise have done as well. But yeah, I mean, like, you know, sometimes it's about misperceptions, and there's a belief and there's a strong narrative, you know, that, well, if we just sort the education system out, that'll solve everything, that'll go a long way. Like, no, like, people perform badly at school because the poor, the being poor bit comes first, you know. And think people talk about like child poverty because it's easier for them to I don't know, have sympathy or something like that if you're talking about children. But if it's a child in poverty, that means the parents don't have enough money, you know. So it's about making sure that we look at the evidence and we look at the whole picture. And some of the comments that came back were things like, we need to make sure that people are working, you know. Well, yeah, we do if they're able to work, you know, but it can't be for poverty wages, and that's an increasing issue, not a decreasing one. So I think you can normally use evidence to counter most of the points that are put forward, but they are born out of a very, very strong, unchallenged narrative. And I think a big part of declaring a poverty emergency is to chip away at that, not just look at the immediate effects of poverty, but chip away, make sure that we're having the right conversation about poverty and why it happens.
That's cool. Mandy, you're an absolute star. I remember meeting you 3 or 4 years ago now, and we talked about all these things. You're actually doing it. I'm absolutely delighted you're doing it, and I'm absolutely certain there are people here who will give you all the support we possibly can give you. And